From China to the Middle East, Europe, and even the Americas, people have had contact with a different type of spirit. Not gods, and not the spirits of the dead. They usually inhabit an underworld, and some of them wish ill upon mankind. These creatures sometimes have ranks and affiliations, entire tomes written about their societies. To classify these spirits is called demonology. Hey folks, this is James, aka Threscuinus. We're taking a little break from Egypt to talk about one of my favorite subjects, demonology. A few things to get straight before we get started. First, some of you may have already heard my definition of what a demon is. For me, a demon is a type of spirit that is not a god, is not truly worshipped, though some may have a small cult, nor a spirit of the dead, but another type of spirit that primarily inhabits the underworld. I do not personally see them as wholly malevolent, but you will certainly find that point of view in certain cultures and from other magi. 2, I'm not talking about demonolatry, which is the modern practice of the worship of demons. Some folks do that, which is fine, but my relationship with these creatures is more akin to the ancient Goas or Goets of ancient Greece. If you want to learn more about that, I suggest you check out my video on Goetia. Today, I want to talk about how demons have been categorized. What are the ways in which they associate with themselves, the gods, and other types of spirits and humans? The prime example of this being what is referred to as the grimoires, a body of literature from the High Middle Ages that gives lists of spirits and how to work with them. One of the reasons we need to look beyond Egypt this time is that, as the few scholars who study such matters have noted, Egypt has no real demonology. As I've mentioned before, there's brief mentions of certain gods having cadres of demons at their command, the slayers of Sekhmet being a prime example, but there are no true classifications for these spirits, and some would even argue against calling them demons at all. Creating that demonology is one of the primary efforts of my work, but we'll save that for another video. I'm going to use the aforementioned grimoires as the foundation for this line of thinking, but it's going to go places you may have not considered. A good place to start is the late, great Jake Stratton Kent's book, Pandemonium. In that volume, Jake draws upon numerous grimoires to try and form a more complete picture of the most common spirits listed. His categories are an excellent jumping off point. In his book, Jake compares and contrasts spirit lists from sources as diverse as the Greek Magical Papyri, the Testament of Solomon, the Grimoire Verum, and others. Beginning with spirits associated with the cardinal directions, days of the week, and other astrological timing. In the individual entities on the spirits themselves, he includes variant spellings, known sigils, rank, and known abilities. Some grimoires, like the Verum, even attribute spirits to geographic locations like Europe, Africa and Asia, and the Americas. It's rank that seems to be the most concern in these grimoires. The demon's title, who they serve, and who serves them. It should be of no surprise that medieval sources see things from a medieval point of view. Demons are kings, princes, and marquises, and dukes. Given that most medieval European societies gave great importance to a person's station, the station of the spirits was seen as important as well. What's obvious here is that it is a projection. As above, so below. Or in this case, as on earth, so is the same in hell. But I have to ask, since it is so obvious this is a reflection of medieval thinking, why should we accept that's truly the way that these beings organize themselves? In the end, we project these values because we understand them. If their social structures are completely foreign than what any human has experienced, could we even communicate with them? Some assumptions need to be made, if only for comparison. Though it would be a mistake to assume that these spirits continue to mirror human societies. While completely possible that they have taken up democratic or authoritarian forms, it's not a given. We often mistake the currents of history as progression, that what we have now is just the eventual outcome of our learning, but that's not true. And of course, you can still find monarchies on Earth. There's no presumption that things have to change. All we can do is ask and try to decipher in as near as terms as possible how they organize themselves. But before we rush to see ourselves in them, we should consider, how do human societies really govern? Many would be surprised to hear that it can be much different than what we have now. I highly recommend the book The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. The authors propose that humanity is currently stuck in certain patterns of organization, whereas for the majority of human history, things have been much more fluid. They cite the original city-states of Sumer, where if an unpopular ruler took hold, many just up and left, returning to hunter-gatherer ways, or taking up farming elsewhere. They point out that certain Native American peoples would change from matriarchal to patriarchal depending on the season and their current needs. When the tribe needed to be organized for war, they had warrior leaders. When war was over, those leaders would be cast aside. If we accept the premise that the grimoires may be faulty on the subject, it leaves open a host of possibilities for the ambitious magus to study. Because what we all should be doing is creating our own demonology. And by all means, share notes and read books and compare with others to discover trends and to verify your findings. But we all have our own outlook and how we view these spirits and what's important to us when interacting with them. A shout out to my new friend J. Crow, who voiced his feelings on what he looks for when making spirit allies. From his perspective, the demons he works with, the ones from the grimoire Verum, share a certain outlook. To quote, "If you've ever been demonized, devalued, banished, cast out, erased, told you were fake, didn't matter, or pushed to the margin, oh my, do I know a group of spirits you're going to find common ground with." I too am more interested in a spirit's ideology than their place in the ranks. How do they approach concepts like freedom and equality and individualism? I want to work with spirits that share my views. Wouldn't they be much easier to get along with? And what I'm saying here is that what has been done in the past in the grimoires is impressive, but it only scratches the surface. If we only look for characteristics that facilitate evoking them, or their status, or their ability to be useful to us, we leave so much behind. Not to say that asking, who do you ally yourself with, isn't an important question. You can tell a lot about a person by who their friends are. And like I've said many times before, I want to work with spirits allied with Thoth, because Beaky and I are friends. And it stands to reason I would enjoy the company of his other friends. Other questions you could be asking the spirits are, what constitutes aggression for your people? What is war? Do you have genders? What are their characteristics? How do you contribute to your society? And what is expected of you? Especially important questions if you want to live up to their expectations as much as they live up to yours. It's worth repeating that the stereotype of the wizard among their tomes exists for a reason. And don't think that all those books are just about magic. You need to be well-rounded. You need some anthropology, some history, and perhaps some economics to boot. Because what exactly do these beings trade in? Pop culture would have us believe they trade in human souls, but there's little of this in the actual magical corpus. Offerings, however, are a major part of the tradition. You should pay attention to what previous summoners have used in that regard, but that shouldn't be the limit. What happens when you find yourself in my position, where you regularly treat with spirits that no one has encountered before? Another quote from me that you may have heard before, spirits should be approached from within the context of the culture that first communicated with them. Yes, this is just another form of reflection of our own values, but ultimately, we don't have much more to go on. But go beyond the surface. Learn the history and traditions of the people who wrote about the spirits you work with. More than just their magic or religious practices. How did they think? For me, that means concepts the Egyptians hold dear, like Ma'at. You also see personifications of geography, like gods of the Nile and the Mediterranean Sea. Luckily for me, the Egyptians tended to deify everything, making these concepts personas. There are several approaches to magic. For many, they follow the get laid and get paid approach. Magic for them is about gaining some sort of temporal power. The ancients did tend to lean in that direction, with much of the magical literature coming from professional spellcasters who were paid for their services. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I've always encouraged new magi to try this type of magic, at least to prove to themselves that magic is real. And I'm not ashamed to admit I still do this when I'm in need. But there is more. Most of my time is now spent exploring and learning about the spirits. That has a satisfaction all its own. Those who wrote the grimoires probably felt that way to some extent as well, with many of the demons listed noted for their ability to teach astrology and herbalism and other useful things. Before you go, let me remind you to like and subscribe. I'm getting very close to that 1,000 subscriber mark, and thank you to everyone who has done so. Unfortunately, there's another hurdle to cross, as YouTube also requires a minimum of 4,000 watch hours per year to qualify for monetization. The good news is you're doing the most important thing right now, watching until the end. But it would help me greatly if you would re-watch videos or even play them in the background if you don't have data limits. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Add your name to the Scroll of Thoth by joining our Ko-Fi fundraising campaign. Ko-Fi subscribers will receive access to the extensive archive of Scroll of Thoth podcasts, access to our private Discord server, special extended cuts of our videos, a 10% discount in our store on all Scarlet Ibis Apothecary items, bonus videos and other content, and a free 3-card tarot reading every month for those who subscribe for $10 or more. Help me create more videos on the occult and the spiritual history of ancient Egypt. Discover a magic that goes beyond the repeated platitudes of Victorian-era dilettantes and look into the true heart of the Western esoteric tradition.